You know how sometimes you start off doing one thing and it just kind of changes into something else? Hi everyone, it's the Four Gun Guy. And even though I've got my Vortex hat on, you don't see a Vortex Gen 3 in this shot. And this is a review of the Vortex Razor Gen 3. But there's a long story involved in this, and you know that I always have a story or a journey to tell. So we're gonna do that today. Now, what I wanted to do is start off with an introduction to the Razor Gen 3. So I want to go over my comparison matrix, where I'm going to compare the Gen 3 with other what are considered tier 1 scopes, because that's what Vortex wanted to do with the Gen 3, right? Kind of get up there in competition with Tangent Theta and ZCO and all these other scopes. And I think they almost got there. So I want to do that comparison matrix. And especially, you know me, I'm a reticle guy. So we're going to compare all the different reticles. I've actually got 7 scopes we're going to compare for that. Then I want to get into the Gen 3 functionality. So we're going to be right up close on it. Show you how to re-zero the turrets. I'm going to show you everything about that scope. Then we're going to do a comparison, an optical comparison between the Razor Gen 3 and my ZCO 527. And then we're going to have some final thoughts. And you're going to understand why I do not have a Razor Gen 3 on this bench right now. But please don't skip ahead to that point, because it really is a good scope and I really want to do it justice. So if you're ready to go, let's get to it. Well, here's the famous comparison matrix. Now, look, these are the 7 scopes I decided to add in this matrix. I know there are other scopes out there, but this is just what I was looking at. And I actually added one at the very last minute. We're going to talk about that here in a second. So let's go down Razor Gen 3 stats. So again, warranty unlimited. We all know the Vortex warranty. Glass is Japanese glass. The magnification is 6:36. So you get a little more higher magnification in the scope than you did with the Gen 2. Weight, it's a pretty hefty scope, and that's because, as I've said before, these things are built like tanks. I actually like that about these scopes. 34 millimeter tube, which I really like. You don't have to buy some different scope mount like you do with the Zero Compromise. It is 57 or 56 millimeter objective, eyepiece 45, and so forth. Now, it only has one reticle option right now, but I think there are some more either coming out or they just came out. I just didn't see them. Field of view, eye relief, look, it sits right in here with the rest of them. The re-zero mechanism, I really like how they've redone the re-zero mechanism, and we're going to see that when we go over this thing. Illuminated reticle, elevation and windage. This has, I think, if I'm looking here, yep, the most elevation and windage out of all the other scopes. So they've really put a lot into this. And if you look at the parallax, it's really the lowest parallax there, 10 yards. The Schmidt and Bender goes down to 10 meters, which is a little over 10 yards. Zeiss goes to 11 yards. So look, if you're looking at 22 competition, this is a great scope to consider. And if you're looking at long range, this is a great scope to consider as well because of that reticle. And you know me and the reticles. So let's talk about some of the comparisons with some of these others. Zero Compromise, you all know that's what I'm running. It's got the European shot glass. I love that scope. I love the reticle. As I said, I'm a reticle guy. And really, it's comparable, I think. The Razor Gen 3 is comparable glass-wise, to be really honest with you, with the ZCO. I think it's just a little short, but it's pretty darn close. And then when we look at the others like Tangent Theta, I honestly think that they have the best glass, period. I just do. It's German glass. I emailed those folks and asked them where their glass comes from, Germany. I've looked through those things, folks. They are beautiful, beautiful scopes. I think they're just a bit better than the ZCO. Night Force, again, very popular scope out there. I don't think you can go wrong with Night Force. Schmittenbender and Collis. Look, this is where we start kind of getting into the reticle conversation here. And this is where I think these two kind of fall short a little bit. Now I want to talk real briefly about the one I told you I just brought in here at the very last minute, and that is this Zeiss. This scope looks like it could be a pretty unbelievable scope if the glass holds up. But when we get to the reticles, you'll see what I mean. And it has 6:36 magnification. It's a little lighter than the Gen 3. And it's got a lot of the same characteristics as the other ones have. So I just wanted to put that on there because I think it's an option that you might want to look into. If you look at the very bottom, what's in the box, of course, Vortex always throws, the kitchen sink in there. These other manufacturers, they'll put some things in there, but not everything. And that's kind of discomforting to me because when you're charging us this much for these scopes, you should be throwing a lot of this stuff in. So there's the comparison matrix. You can pause this. I'm happy to send it to you if you want to build one of your own. Let's now look at the reticle comparison. Well, let's talk about the EBR-7D reticle now. I love this reticle. It's just like the 7C. It's got a very clean center dot. It's got the 1/2 mil markings on the windage. I do kind of wish they'd have put the 1/2 mil markings on the elevation as well, but that's okay. But it's a very clean reticle, and I really, really like this. Let's compare it with the others now. Let's compare it to the Zeiss reticle. And, as I said, Zeiss is the one that I just threw in here. I'm really, really surprised by this reticle. It looks busy at first glance, but I really like this Zeiss. It's got 1/2 mil marks, both windage and elevation, and they're very distinctive. But compared with the Gen 3, that EBR-7D, I think the 7D is much cleaner, but I'm very interested to get behind this Zeiss and see how this looks through the scope. Well, and here's one of my favorite reticles, the ZCO, my Zero Compromise. This is the Impact 2 reticle. And when you compare this with the Gen 3, they're very, very similar. It's just that the 1/2 mark on the windage is on the top on the ZCO, and the 1/2 mark on the windage on the Gen 3 is on the bottom. But if you look at the elevation, this is where things are a bit different between those two. I actually like the Gen 3 reticle that they brought that elevation up to the 1 mil mark and spread it out there. The ZCO just has the 1 mil mark on the elevation. It doesn't branch out into the tree until the 2 mil mark. So just some things to consider there. Both, however, have a really good center dot. Tangent Theta, this is their Gen 3 XR Fine reticle. Again, really like it. It's very clean, but it's almost too clean for me. There's no half mil marking. And I have to say those mil markings on the windage are really kind of small. If you didn't have those numbers there, which I'm really glad they do, those might be a little hard to distinguish when you're behind the scope. Really good center dot though. And I do like the tree on this thing. All right, Night Force Mil XT. I'm sorry, this thing is just way too busy for me. I'm sure I'd get used to it. It looks like it's got a good center dot, but those 1/2 mil markings, I mean, between the 4 and the 6 and the hash marks are up and down. And I'm just happy that they have the mil markings, the 1, 2, 3, 4 on that, because if they started at 2 like most scopes do, you'd be all over the place trying to figure out where 1 mil is. Just in my opinion, I do like the fact though that the tree starts at the 1 mil mark on the elevation, and it's pretty wide. So it's good. It just, to me, I think would be a bit confusing to start out using this scope. Schmidt and Bender, this is their Grid 2 reticle, I guess. This thing is just way overpowering, and really they have no other really good options for their reticles. I don't even know how I'd get behind this thing to shoot a match to figure out where I am on the target. Way too busy, and yeah, this would not even be a contender for me. Now this is the Collis, their Skimmer 4 reticle. I do like this. I think it's pretty clean, good center dot. Doesn't have the 1/2 mil markings on the windage, but that's okay because I think the 2 and the 4 stand out enough that you know that it's 1/2 mil in between them. And then it does have the 1/2 mil mark on the elevation, which I really do like. So this is not a bad reticle. My initial thought was, I'm not too keen on this one. It might look too busy, but it's not. The only thing I would say that is that on the tree, they don't have the 2/10 markings, which I really think they're missing there. I think if they could have had some 2/10 markings on that tree on the windage at the 1, 2, 3, 4 marks, I think this would have been a really fantastic reticle. Well, here it is. It's a beautiful scope, as you can see. I love this bronze color that they've done on these scopes. And again, I just wanted to show you that, yes, it does come with a metal throw switch, which is really nice. I do have the sunshade on it, and this thing just threads beautifully on there. So that's really nice. And I'm going to cover this whole thing in tape anyway to protect it. But let's look at what some of the functionality of this is. Again, it has an illuminated reticle, which I will probably never use, but I like the fact that you just flip this out, turn it, 1, 2, and it has off settings in between the numbers. So you don't have to always try to find the off, which I like that a lot. It's got a great parallax adjustment knob. This thing is buttery smooth. Stiff enough that you're not going to bump it, but not too stiff that I'm having to really, really work to make a change. As far as the magnification goes, back here, like that. Again, very smooth and tight enough that I know I'm not going to knock it off kilter when I'm moving around. So I really like this. And the knurling on these rings here, it's sharp. I mean, it's not going to cut you, but I tell you what, it's tactile. You know you've grabbed it, and you know that you're not going to slip on this stuff. The ocular focus ring, again, very tight, but not so tight as you're going, come on, move. So I really like that. It does not have a locking ring, which, that'd be nice, but it's nothing that I'm going to go, hey, I don't want that scope over. Now, let's look at the turrets and how we're going to make these adjustments. I really like how they rethought this. In the past, you would set it, then you'd come up and you'd go, okay, I got to adjust 1/2 mil, come up 1/2 mil. You'd come up 1/2 mil, then you'd either drop it or whatever, loosen screws up here, pick this up, turn it, drop it. Yeah, you don't have to do that anymore. So what you're going to do with this one is it's going to be on 0. You're going to set it on 0. You're going to loosen this screw right here, and then you're going to take your shots. And if I have to come up 5/10, then I use this top dial here, and I come up 5/10. I take a shot. Is it on target? No, you got to come up another 10th, come up another 10th. And when you're done, you're done. What you're going to do is, I'm going to set this back to 0 because I haven't even zeroed this thing yet. I'm doing that Friday. And then when you're done, you're just coming up here, tightening this down, and you're done. And that's it. And now, there you go. So I will tell you, it's not super tactile. In fact, the first time that I got behind one of these things. It was a new one, and I was not impressed with the turrets. In fact, I remember telling a buddy of mine, well, I'm not buying that thing yet, not unless they fix those turrets. And apparently they've fixed them. These still aren't as tactile as I would think they would be, so I may need to send this in, as many have done, to have Vortex tighten up the turrets. They apparently do something to them. Another thing that was happening, just so you all know, because I'm being totally open and honest here, is that the first scopes they sent out, apparently, when you lifted this elevation turret up, it would slide back down. It wouldn't stay up. Now this one seems to be staying up, and if I'm in a match and I've got to go from there to there, and then back to there, and back to there, looks like it's going to be okay. If I'm bumping around a little bit here, it doesn't look like it's going down. So I think I'll be okay. What one of the guys told me who owns one of these, he said, look, shoot it for about 2 or 3 matches and see how it works. But I don't see that I'm going to need that. And then again, if you look right here, it's got a revolution indicator. So if you watch this thing right here, as I rotate this and come around, it pops out. There's 1 revolution, and I think I can go around almost 2. So that's, where am I there? 20, I'm at 19. Yeah, so I'm at 19. Whoops, see, it went back in as I was doing it. That's funny. I've got this on a 20 MOA mount. And then the same thing, you can't see this, but the same thing with the windage, right? It's the same thing. The windage seems a little more mushier to me than the elevation knob. And maybe this is just one of those that they did the elevation knob before they sent it out, but they just decided not to screw with the windage, because you don't dial windage multiple times in a stage. You basically set it and then leave it that way. And I don't even set my windage. I hold wind, I don't dial wind. So it doesn't make any difference whether that thing's tight or not to me that much. So anyway, there you go. There's a look at it. It does come with these tools. As I said, the sunshade, the switch, and yeah, get some looks down range through this thing. Both are side by side. This is the Ray Gen from the left, the ZCO Comparison 527 on the right. And yeah, I mean, they're the glass, as I told you earlier, guys, the glass is very, very good on this Gen 3. I think the Razor or the ZCO does have a little bit of an edge, but you know, for the money you're going to pay for this Razor Gen 3, especially if you can pick it up on sale, this glass is pretty amazing. And please remember that this is through a trigger cam. I might not have gotten all of the focus, you know, as I should have on both these scopes. Well, here we are at 200 yards, and I think you get a pretty good idea of, you know, the scopes at a little greater distance. I'm going to go out 600 here in a minute. But I think, again, the clarity is very good between both these scopes. Remember, the Gen 3's on the left, ZCO's on the right. And of course, I did have changing conditions, right? The sun would come in, sun would go out, clouds and whatnot. But I think they both fared really well at this 200-yard distance. Well, at 600 yards, this is where my trick cam kind of let me down here, guys, and I apologize. These two scopes really through the glass, through your naked eye, these two scopes are very, very close. And I keep saying that, but I can't say it enough. The glass on the Razor Gen 3 is far beyond the Gen 2's glass. And it is rivaling the Zero Compromise glass. So you may not see that in this video here, but I can tell you they're very, very close. Well, after all of that, let's kind of talk a little bit about the journey here. So I got the Razor Gen 3. We just went over the matrix. You just saw it as compared to the ZCO. I think the glass compares very well. Love the reticle. You know, I started with a Gen 2 with the EBR 7C reticle, loved the 7D reticle, but here's where I'm kind of going to go off on Vortex a little bit. Now, I don't know if I got a damaged scope or not, but when I got it, the turrets were, as I said, you saw in the video, the turrets weren't super mushy. The elevation turret didn't fall back down, so I felt good about that. But I'm telling you, for me, I couldn't deal with the parallax. Okay? Now, I had a Razor Gen 2 for 2 years. Loved it. I love that scope, right? And it's very much like this Razor, or like this ZCO. If I'm at a match from 400 yards out to 1,000 yards, I can pretty much set this parallax in the morning, and I generally don't need to touch it very much, maybe a little bit, but not much at all for the rest of the day. Okay? The tracked toric that I have on my 22, on my Voodoo, that I'm now using for rimfire competition, that's the same way. I can pretty much adjust that parallax on that thing, and from a 50-yard target out to a 300-yard target, I'm generally not messing with the parallax. My Razor Gen 3, and again, I'm saying mine, maybe it was just the scope, but my Razor Gen 3, I had to adjust the parallax literally every change of 200 yards. And I mean really adjust the parallax. So part of me wants to say, maybe it's my eyes, right? Maybe it's my eyes, but how is that I don't have to do it with this or the tracked, but I had to do it with the Gen 3. So that, I couldn't get used to that. That honestly was the main point of me changing back to a ZCO for the centerfire. Now, the other thing is, and again, you've kind of heard me beat up Vortex on this before, why did you release a scope when you knew it had turret issues? When you knew people were going to have to send that scope back to you for you to tighten up the turrets and adjust them so the elevation turret didn't fall, because I know at least 2 other people I shoot with that either had to do it or they just did it, right? Because they didn't want to take the chance. So those are my reasons. All I would say to you is this. If you're thinking about the Gen 3, glass-wise, it's awesome. It's a really good scope. Reticle-wise, it's fantastic. It's one of my top 3 reticles, period. Top 3 reticles. Again, their guarantee, you can't beat that. Built like a tank, just like the Gen 2. That was another thing I loved about it. But I would caution you to go to a match. If you know someone who has one, please spend some time behind it. You may not have the parallax issue I had. The turrets may be fine. It all might be just the best scope you'll ever buy. So I am not going to sit here and tell you, and again, Vortex doesn't give me anything. I bought it with my own money. I sold it. I bought all these scopes with my own money. But I'm not going to bash Vortex on this one. I'm just telling you, just be careful. Because if you've got to adjust it for that parallax every 200 yards, you are not going to be a happy camper. Especially if you're using this for competition. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this one. This one was really hard for me to put together because actually halfway through the review is when I pretty much made the decision to sell it. And I was really so upset at that point that I was probably not going to give it a really fair review. So that's why I kind of took some time, let myself cool down. And when I finally decided to do this review, I thought I'm going to be more objective and just talk about the good points and then talk about the not so good points. Because I always want to be honest with you guys, right? You're tuning in, you're watching me, and I really appreciate it. And I think you deserve honesty and not just someone that says, this is my latest scope and I love it and it's great. And then next week they have a different scope. I know I go through a lot of scopes, but I think I've been honest and objective in some of the reviews that I've given some of this equipment. So there you have it. Thanks again for watching. Subscriptions, the likes, the comments, love them all. Really appreciate it. I do have some more of the practice videos coming up. And until next time, shoot straight.